Today, I want to just very briefly talk about my story and sort of the larger picture of community management. We come to a lot of conferences a lot of times and talk about kind of what's happening right now and what the needs are and what the sort of the state of affairs is in general. But it might be kind of fun to look back and see the history. But before we do that, show of hands, who's been in the community industry, calling themselves community professional, however you want to talk about it, for a year? All right. If you keep the hands up, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. All right, 10 years? Few. All right, 15 years. All right, we're all old. I include myself in that. So I've been doing community stuff in some form or fashion for 20 years, depending on how you talk about community. I've had the extreme luck and pleasure to work at brands like Lego and PwC and Apple. I've also worked with some really great brands like H&R Block and Eli Lilly and Canon, and the list goes on. And I'm very excited at the moment. You heard Gina talk about it a second ago, the Renaissance. I've been calling it a resurgence of community. And there's a really great opportunity that I think we're all standing in front of with community. To sort of learn from the history, see what we did the last time. Why are we talking about it as a resurgence? Because we had sort of a rise and fall of interest. If you go back 15 years or so, there was a lot of talk about this community thing, and it sort of naturally gravitated into some other things. But we're seeing a resurgence. There's a lot of interest. I talk to a lot of clients on a daily basis saying either our communities have atrophied, or we want to start a community, we want to restart a community and just sort of start over from scratch because ours has kind of died off, which is a great place to be. But from my perspective, I think it's really important to understand the history, because I don't want to look back in another 15 years and say, oh, we had a second chance to do it, right? And we missed the lessons from the first time around. So with that, I kind of wanted to tell my story. And this is just my story. If we talk to some of those folks that have been around as long as I have, then they'd have their own stories, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some things. But I kind of wanted to break it down into 5 acts today. Act 1, starting with the Cluetrain Manifesto. Show of hands, how many people have read this? That's not enough. You don't know your history. If you haven't read it, it's worth picking up the copy that you can get today. It's online. Google Cluetrain Manifesto. You can read it, all of it. But for those of you not familiar, in 1999, 4 very smart guys put together a manifesto. They called it the Cluetrain Manifesto. It was 95 thesis points about kind of what was happening in the culture of business. The point number 1, and you probably heard some version of this, was markets are conversations. And at that time, that was a pretty revolutionary concept, right? We had, those of us doing web development, and sort of trying to make things happen on the web, trying to move businesses more digitally, we're having a real struggle trying to figure out how to talk about what was happening, what we wanted to see, until we saw Cluetrain and this markets are conversations tagline, right? This point of what was happening, how do we create it? And it really brought us a sort of a consistent purpose, a consistent platform. It was a way for us to connect when we went to conferences and we said, hey, we're trying to build conversation, right? It sort of rallied us, and I think that was a pretty stunning move that opened up Act 2. And Act 2 was what I've called Prescale, right, for lack of a better way to put it. But these were the days when we took that 1999 manifesto and tried to put it to work. And in 2000, I joined Lego, and was there until 2006. And I joined as a senior web producer, but also had this other second full-time job of doing community engagement, community management, whatever you want to call it at the time. And I had almost no budget. I had basically no tools. There was a relatively small group of adult enthusiasts, people who were 18 plus and built with Lego as a creative medium, the 6-foot-tall Statues of Liberty or the 50-foot square train layout that they and their club might put together, doing amazing things. The company didn't understand it. They had no idea what was going on. But here, I joined Lego and had Cluetrain burning a hole in the back of my brain saying, let's put this to work. Let's see what we can do. And so, in this time, I really learned about this power of direct engagement, right? In some ways, we've lost some of this because we've tried to scale up. But before scale, the only thing we had to do, the only thing we had as a tool at our disposal in many cases, was the ability for us to connect either one-on-one or with small groups of sort of community leaders who would then spread the word out to the larger audience. But when we came together, and I sort of made the point at that time, Lego is a creative medium. That's what we're here to do. We're here to promote that idea. This isn't a toy. This isn't something we're trying to sell. It's a medium, a creative medium that we're trying to legitimize. And that fan community got super excited about that because now I'm not just a weird adult who plays with Lego. I'm an artist, right? I've got a creative medium. And so together we started to work on this idea. And you can see in this picture, it's sort of dark, sorry about that, but you can see a collection of people building a very large Lego model for a museum in New Hampshire. And that group of people is made up of employees and fans working together, right? We were building programs that were all based on this direct engagement. And the Act 3 comes around in 2006-ish, where we started to see the growth of social media, right? Twitter launches. We sort of all say in the community industry, this is fantastic. This is amazing, right? We finally have a chance to create scale. We've been doing this manually for so long, but now there's these tools. And, social media has been a mixed blessing for community professionals, as many of you probably know. It has both helped us scale and create legitimacy and align what we've been doing and what we've been talking about for so long, this markets or conversations concept. It's helped us align with the footprint of our larger business, right? So we've been able to integrate more with traditional marketing campaigns, traditional support teams, that sort of thing, which has been great. The downside, though, is that our cause sort of got lost, right? And business sort of became the cause, right? Our scale became the focus. And we started to lose a lot of those really great direct engagement techniques. And we saw a shift, I think, pretty dramatically from community was the way that we engaged, right? Traditional forums, traditional outreach, going to meetups as the company and representing the company out there in the world. And it sort of all came back internally. So we started, excuse me, we started seeing a real struggle to create that, excuse me, to create that larger dynamic. So what that really ended up in, though, is what I've been calling the cold years in Act 4, right? Where we, if you were doing community work, you were doing community-focused work, it was very difficult to get attention. The business case conversations that Gina was talking about, even in a dynamic where you had really positive support, getting people to sign off on community efforts was still fairly difficult. And I love this Terminator quote that comes at the end of Terminator 1. Sarah, thank you for your courage through the dark years. I can't help you with what you must soon face, except to tell you that the future is not set. I kind of felt like the last few years, from about 2011 to 2014, 15, that's where we were at. We were having a real struggle getting attention. And, this caused some atrophy. I tried to hire a community manager at my last role, and it took months longer than it should have, right? Because there's just not as many of us as there should be. Now, that's the downside. The upside is that, Act 5 here is the resurgence piece. Everywhere I go, I'm having a lot of conversations with clients, with brands, who are saying, we've grown our social media presence. It's great. It's now sort of integrated into our day-to-day activity from a marketing standpoint, from a support standpoint, from brand standpoint. But now what? What comes next, right? We've got 40,000 or 40 million users, followers on Twitter or friends. We've got groups on Facebook, but they're just not doing what we need them to do. We need something more robust. We want to put those 40,000 followers who have made an effort to click a button that says we like you. Okay, great. So let's put that to work. Let's really start to make a larger business case. What happens? And so there's a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm I have for coming to a group like this and saying, we're here again, right? The same enthusiasm that I was feeling in 2006 when social media was new, I'm feeling now for communities. And since we are in this realm of resurgence, let's really take a pause and say, how do we move from just executing on sort of traditional community-based principles, and how do we start to think about this from a leadership standpoint? How do we really bake in community? How do we get community across, not just as a support activity, supporting the business, and how do we start to lead the business? How do we start to really drive this forward? And I think there's 4 pieces just to kind of leave you with, and I think any good community effort, as well as any good overall, how do we change the world of how people think about communities, there's 4 pieces. One is we have to establish our mission. So if we go back to the Cluetrain, they really did a good job of setting in place our mission, and that's what all of us in the room for our own industry, for our own improvement, need to really think about is, what is our mission? What mission are we on to improve the world, and why is community, traditional online community management, why does that matter? What are we here for? I think the second piece is a sense of ownership. So how do we think about making sure that whatever we're doing, whatever we're building, is being done together with the users that we are building it with? When we think about how to engage community members more effectively, when they feel like this is theirs, when they feel like they're on a path that's theirs, it's vastly more effective, and they get vastly more interested. So how do we make sure that we are building a sense of ownership into everything that we're doing so that these things last beyond us, right? So if we have a downturn in the industry, if we have a disinterest from executives, that community doesn't disappear, doesn't dissipate because we've backed out. To that end, how do we make sure it's steady? One of the worst things you can do for a community is create instability, so that people who are wanting to volunteer, whether you call them power users or volunteers or anything else, whatever that group is, if they feel like their contributions aren't worthwhile, or if you might pull your budgets next year and all this work that they put into building their profile on your community is meaningless, they're not going to do that. This moment they get a hint of that, they're going to back out. So how do we create that steady function? And last is, whatever we're doing, even with a support community for technical devices, how do we make that meaningful? And there can be meaning in that. When my phone, that's my only connection to my family, it's my only connection to business, because I don't have a home phone, I don't have a business phone, it's my phone, right? When that iPhone breaks, I've got to be able to fix that quickly. I've got to be able to get answers. I've got to be able to figure out how to do things quickly. And if I can't, I've got real problems in my life, right? So even if you think there's not a lot of meaning, it's just a business task, stop thinking that way. There is meaning to be had. And when we build all 4 of these, I think we've got an opportunity. Excuse me, the allergies this time of year are killing me. When we put all 4 of these together, when we think about our history, we've got an opportunity to really create a resurgence that helps us all. It elevates not only our own roles in the industry, but also our own position as far as what community means to business. So with that, that is my time. Thank you very much.